In early November of 2025, a Florida family boarded the Carnival Horizon for what was supposed to be a blended family cruise meant to mark new beginnings and new traditions. But within days, that trip turned into a nightmare. On the morning of November 7th, 18-year-old Anna Kepner was found dead, hidden under her cabin bed, wrapped in a blanket and covered with life jackets. Her death was quickly ruled a homicide. Federal investigators determined she had died from mechanical asphyxia caused by another person, and surveillance footage shows she never left her cabin after returning the night before. This case is still unfolding, and there's a lot we don't know. But what we do know is heartbreaking. Anna was a teenager with her whole life ahead of her, and whose last moments took place behind a locked cabin door on international waters. Tonight, we're going to walk through what's been confirmed so far, who Anna was, what we think happened on board the Carnival Horizon, the complicated family dynamics that have surfaced in the investigation, and why a certain 16-year-old in Anna's blended family is now being referred to as a suspect by multiple sources and legal documents. This is the developing and deeply tragic story of the death of 18-year-old Anna Kepner.
What you can't explain is coming back again. I can see it now, I can see it now. What you can't explain, coming back again.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel, and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. So today we're talking about Anna Kepner. But first, I'm going to tell you I am sick. I think everybody is. So I'm sorry for my voice. If it, goes in and out a little bit, if it just sounds a little more gravelly than usual, I think it'll pass. But from what I'm hearing, people are just being sick for 6 months and no one knows why. Let me know in the comments if you're in the same position. So Anna Kepner, what makes this case so unsettling is that every time you think you have a clearer picture of what happened, a new detail comes out that complicates everything all over again. It is truly one of those situations where nothing is straightforward. Not the timeline, not the details, not even the relationships between the people who were supposed to love and protect Anna. And because this is still an active federal investigation, we're watching this story unfold in real time with pieces of information coming out in court filings, interviews, social media posts. And I've been following it since the beginning. I've gotten a lot of requests to cover it. And I know a lot of people have covered this, but I wanted to wait until there was enough to put into a video, and also until there wasn't new information and speculation coming out every single day. And at this point, we've kind of gone long enough where it doesn't seem like anything groundbreaking is happening. Probably something's going to come out the second I finish filming this video. But yeah, I think right now we're in a good place to sort of have a groundwork for what's happening in this case. And while I was going through everything, the news, the legal documents, the statements, the interviews, the history between the adults in Anna's life, something became very clear to me. And this is my opinion, this is my feeling about this case, but it's very hard because obviously what happened to Anna is terrible, but also I feel terrible for her for what she had to deal with in life, because what it looks like from my perspective is Anna spent most of her life surrounded by people who were more worried about themselves than they were about her. They were focused on their own wants and desires, their own projected image, their own conflicts. And as a result, it looks like Anna struggled at times to feel safe, supported, or even seen. There are so many adults involved in this case, currently out in the world hurling insults at each other, pointing fingers at each other, while the one person who should have been at the center of their concern has ended up being the one whose voice is the smallest at this time. And that's a big part of why I wanted to cover this case now, even while it's developing. Anna isn't just a headline or a tragic detail in an FBI press release. She's not just a true crime video. She was a teenager with dreams and hobbies, friendships and fears, moments of joy and times of heartbreak. She was someone who tried to stay positive even when she was struggling. And it seems to me that for a long time, Anna's feelings were overlooked or minimized by the very people who should have listened, or at least paid more attention. So today I want to try as much as I can to bring Anna back into the center of her own story, because she deserves to be understood as a full person, not just as the victim of a crime. And she deserves to have her voice heard, even if the people around her didn't always make space for that when she was alive. We have a lot to talk about today, and we're going to get into it. And I can't wait to hear everybody's thoughts and what you think about this case. I know a lot of people have thoughts already, but let me know in the comment section where you're at so far. But first, let's have a word from the sponsor of today's video, Tingly. You know that feeling when you find the perfect gift for someone, the kind that makes their face light up and you know they'll never forget it? That's the feeling Tingly is built around, and that is the kind of gift I live for giving. Tingly is an experience gift box. Basically, you give someone the chance to choose their own adventure, and I mean that literally. We're talking hot air balloon rides, food tours, relaxing spa escapes, and you get to choose from 150,000 plus experiences across the US and worldwide. You just pick the box, they pick the experience. Tingly is a gorgeous, unique, and memorable way to say, I want you to make memories. And Tingly delivers in one of two ways, in the form of a gift box like this one or an e-voucher. And it's great because Tingly is perfect for last-minute gift giving, because the e-voucher is going to arrive in seconds. But I really do have a soft spot for the magic of a Tingly box appearing at your home. And inside, the lucky recipient will find easy step-by-step instructions on how to redeem their gift. You can even add a special message for them. And the very important message of give stories, not stuff, is prominently displayed. What I love most about Tingly is that it's a gift that doesn't expire. Seriously, there's no pressure to use it by a certain date. Now, it's super easy to use the Tingly website, so I ended up getting a Tingly experience for my youngest daughter, Bella, whose birthday is coming up in January. Remember, you aren't limited to experiences in your zip code. You can go anywhere, and she has been begging to go out on a boat and see some dolphins, so we will be going to Panama City Beach, Florida next month to make her wish come true. Now, Tingly has all kinds of different boxes for every special occasion: weddings, honeymoons, graduations, Valentine's Day, all the events in life that define who you are, who you want to be, and who you want to spend each precious moment with. You already saw how easy it was to search for and choose the perfect experience, so now it's your turn to try it out for yourself. Right now, you can get this exclusive Tingly deal, perfect for last-minute gifting. All you have to do is click the link in the description box below or go to tingly.com/Harlowe and use code Harlowe for 25% off all experience and hotel gift boxes. And that's a great deal. 25% off. Once again, that's TINGGLY.com/Harlowe and use code Harlowe at checkout for 25% off. Thank you so much to Tingly for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. So, who was Anna Kepner and what happened to her? As always, to understand what happened at the end, we have to go back to the beginning. Anna was born on June 13th, 2007 in Brevard County, Florida, to her parents, Heather Wright and Christopher Kepner, who had gotten married the previous year when Heather was 21 and Christopher was 22. Now, this is where the complicated family dynamics start, and we're going to go into more detail about that tangled web a bit later. But what you need to know now is that Anna's parents divorced when she was still very young. Christopher remarried in May of 2011 to another woman named Tabitha, and Heather Wright left Florida and moved to Oklahoma, at which point she became estranged from her daughter, Anna. Tabitha was the woman who would act as the primary mother figure in Anna's life for quite a long time, basically between the ages of 3 and 16. And during that time, Tabitha and Christopher had two children together, a boy born in September of 2011, which, yes, means that Tabitha was already quite pregnant on the day of her wedding to Christopher, and then a daughter born in May of 2016. So as of 2016, Anna Kepner would have had two half siblings. There's going to be a lot of people we're adding in as we go along, so I'm trying to keep you sort of grounded so we can build a kind of like family tree together and remember who's who. So in August of 2023, Tabitha and Christopher Kepner got divorced, and there were some arguments about custody of their two children, which once again, we will get into later on. But it looks like Christopher was given visitation with his two youngest children, but his oldest daughter, Anna, remained solely in his custody. He'd gotten full custody of Anna because, once again, her mother, Heather, she kind of took off. She moved to Oklahoma, and she wasn't an active part in Anna's life. So Christopher and Tabitha, they've got two kids, a boy and a girl. They get divorced in 2023. A little bit over a year later, Christopher got married for a third time. Now he's married to a woman named Chantel Hudson, and Chantel has three children from a previous relationship, from a previous marriage. She was married to a man named Thomas Hudson. So at the time of their divorce, the oldest child was legally an adult, and their two younger children went to live in Titusville, Florida with their mother, her new husband, Christopher Kepner, and obviously Anna Kepner, who lived with her father, Christopher. Now, Chantel's minor children were a boy who was born in 2009, making him 16 in 2025, and a girl who was born in 2016, making her 9 in 2025. Okay, so as of 2024, Anna had two half-siblings from her father's marriage to her stepmother, Tabitha, and then two step-siblings from her father's marriage to her new stepmother, Chantel Hudson. Keep up. So she's got four siblings altogether, sort of. I think her mother, Heather, also has had more children, but I don't believe that Anna really knew those children because, like I said, her mother lived out of state, and Anna and Heather weren't close. They weren't really talking that much, it seems. In November of 2025, Anna Kepner was 18 years old and a senior at Temple Christian School in Titusville, Florida. Anna had been participating in dance and gymnastics since the age of 2 or 3, and she'd previously attended Titusville High School, where she was a member of the varsity cheerleading team. And this led to dreams of one day being a cheerleader for the Georgia Bulldogs, the University of Georgia's football team that Anna and her entire family were huge fans of. So according to those who knew her, Anna loved kids, dolphins, arts, and crafts. She loved doing puzzles with her grandmother. You will come to see that, at least from what we can tell, Anna was very, very close to her paternal grandparents. So the parents of her father, Christopher Kepner, their names are Jeffrey and Barbara Kepner. So Anna really loved doing, puzzles with her grandmother, Barbara. You can even see Barbara in some of Anna's TikToks. You can see Jeffrey Kepner in some of Anna's TikToks. So Anna definitely seemed to have some sort of close bond with her grandparents. She was also really into music. Her favorite genre was heavy metal, but friends said that she had a soft spot for Shawn Mendes. Anna seemed like a really sweet and happy girl who was full of compassion and loyalty, and she was even known to volunteer at her grandparents' senior community. Her obituary reads, quote, "Anna was pure energy, bubbly, fun, outgoing, and completely herself. She never had a filter, and that was part of her charm. Whether she was practicing new makeup looks, even if she had nowhere to go, making TikToks in front of the mirror, or blasting a perfectly curated playlist on the boat, Anna lived every day with her whole heart. She loved the sun, the water, boat days, island days, and beach days, anything that let her soak in the light she so easily radiated to others. She loved her siblings deeply and made sure they always felt it, whether it be taking them to the park, Halloween horror nights, or just out for fun, because that's who she was, thoughtful, nurturing, and always thinking of others. She had a big, beautiful heart, often sending out random I love you messages or little gestures that made someone's day. Anna's adventurous spirit showed early. She got her boater's license before she could drive, and she was PADI certified to dive alongside her family. End quote. So Anna's dreams went beyond sunning herself on the beach and planning to cheer on the sidelines. She was set to graduate in May of 2026, and she had recently taken a test to join the military with hopes of enlisting with the Navy and eventually becoming a canine officer. And I think the juxtaposition and well-roundedness of Anna Kepner is incredibly endearing. She saw her future self as being a college football cheerleader as well as a canine police officer. She loved heavy metal music, but she wasn't ashamed to blast Shawn Mendes if the mood struck. She was full of love and care for the people around her, but she also knew how to be strong, and I think that she was learning to start funneling some of the love she had given to others into herself. Anna's life had not been without disappointment and sadness, which is illustrated for us through the TikToks that she posted on her account. On August 1st, 2025, Anna posted a TikTok where she said, quote, "You think you can hurt me? Nah. I have sat here and heard and watched my mom ruin her life and try to ruin mine. She has done nothing for me in life but try to make mine like hers. She has not tried to fight for me. She has not tried to actually have a conversation with me. All she cares about is herself and drugs. So I think I will be fine if you don't like me." And now she sits in jail as we speak, and honestly, I hope she learned something while being in there, because if she's done anything in her life, it's make her kids not even know who she is anymore. Thank you. End quote. So we're going to hear Anna's mother, Heather Wright's explanation for why she wasn't playing a huge role in Anna's life. Once again, that's going to come a bit later on, but looking deeper into Anna's online presence, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. She was very open about her feelings towards her biological mother. Now, I want to be clear and fair here. I have not found any official records or credible news reporting that confirm substance abuse issues, arrests, or legal troubles regarding Heather Wright. So any claims about drug use should be treated very carefully, because those are serious allegations, and without actual evidence that I can hold in my hand and show you, I don't want to just go on that assumption, jump on that train and ride it out. But what is documented undeniably are Anna's own words and her very clear and strong feelings. She clearly thought that her mother was on drugs, or at least at some point, her mother was using drugs and cared about that more than her own family and her own children. And that is what we really need to recognize as important, regardless of what Heather may have to say about their estrangement. Anna was hurting. She was a teenage girl trying to act strong, trying to brush things off and send a message that she was, nonchalant and unbothered, like she'd already accepted and was okay with the hand life dealt her when it came to her mother. But it's easy to see from her posts that she felt abandoned, let down, and uncared for by someone that she desperately needed and wanted to feel close to. This matters not because we're judging Heather or assigning blame without evidence, but because Anna's perspective, her emotional reality, is part of understanding her life. For years, Anna appears to have been trying to navigate adult-sized wounds with a teenager's toolkit. And when you look at her online footprint, when you read the things she chose to share, you can see a young woman who is trying to process a complicated, painful relationship in the only place she felt she could speak freely, which was social media. And I think honoring her voice and the way she articulated her pain is important when we're trying to understand who Anna was and what she was living with long before she ever stepped onto that cruise ship. On August 20th, Anna posted a series of photos that absolutely broke my heart. So she uses a song, on TikTok, you can post like photos or a video, and then you could put a song over the video or the photos. So she just chose a series of photos and then she put a song over it. And she uses a song that she had already used multiple times in TikToks. And the TikToks that she put the song in, they're clearly targeted towards her mother, Heather. So this song is called "The Man That Came Back" by Jesse Murph, and the lyrics that overlay Anna's post are as follows, quote, "And I still remember you blacked out, face down, asleep in your car, and the violence, the sirens that rang in the dark, and the last straw, the worst of all, the breaking of my mother's heart. And now since December, you've shown up, say I've grown up, you just want to see us. You woke up sober, said you found Jesus," end quote. So the song also talks about the singer being 6 years old, running in her nightgown from the sound of screaming through the walls, and how this was just another night at home. Obviously, the writer of the song is talking about her father, who it seems dealt with some substance abuse issues and terrorized his family because of them. But Anna is clearly directing this post towards her mother, as we can see from the series of photos she has included, as well as the text she wrote over the photos. Hey, Mom, can you help me pick my first homecoming dress out? Thanks, Dad. Hey, Mom, can you come to my varsity meeting? I'm getting lettered. Thanks, Dad. Hey, Mom, I'm going to Georgia. Thanks, Dad. Hey, Mom, can you help me go get my license? Thanks, Dad. Hey, Mom, can we go to Illinois? Thanks, Dad. Hey, Mom, can we go on a cruise? Thank you, Meemaw and Peepaw. Hey, Mom, I'm a senior now. Can you help me paint my parking spot? Now, there's a few things about this post that I want to bring to your attention. First, that final picture after Anna asks her mother to help her paint her parking spot. That picture is of Anna, her father Christopher, and what looks to be Chantal, her father's new wife, his third wife, who he had gotten married to in December of 2024. Now, the caption of this TikTok says, quote, "Thank you guys for everything. Thank you, Mom, for stepping up and being a mom to me. I thought I would never have. I love you guys so much," end quote. And the hashtags are stepmom, dad, Meemaw, Peepaw, ILY guys. I love you guys. So we know Meemaw and Peepaw are Anna's grandparents and Christopher Kepner's parents, Jeffrey and Barbara Kepner. But I do wonder who Anna was referring to when she says mom and tags the word stepmom. Was she speaking about Chantal Hudson, who's in that final picture, the woman that her father had only been married to for about 8 months at that point? Or was Anna referring to Tabitha, the woman who had raised her for 13 years of her life? You know, who are we talking about here? Because there's going to be some reporting that comes out later that maybe Anna didn't like her new stepmother, Chantal, so much. Once again, this could be completely untrue, and Anna and her brand new stepmother were, super close and painted each other's nails and did all that stuff. I don't know. I'm just telling you what I've seen, what I've heard, and what's been reported. But family drama was not the only thing Anna was dealing with in the last months of her life, because she was also going through a breakup from a boy named Josh. Now, according to Josh, the breakup had happened 6 months before Anna went on the cruise in November, but in her October TikToks, she makes it clear that she was still having some strong feelings about it. On October 26th, Anna posted this video. Quote, "Even after every breakup, being disrespected, being lied to, being cheated on, being used, getting manipulated, getting played, I will always have a smile on my face and a kind heart. I don't know why I've been through what I've been through, but I can promise you I never deserved it. Am I mad at those people for what they did to me? No. Am I upset? Yes, but at the end of the day, we are all humans that make mistakes. I am glad I went through what I did because it makes me realize what I don't want in my life. At the end of the day, I pray that one day y'all will learn what y'all did was wrong and don't do it to anyone else, because no one deserves to be treated like that," end quote. Now, can we be sure that Anna is talking about Josh here, or only Josh at least? No, of course not. I think she's talking about multiple people. I think she is talking about her mom, maybe friends, other boyfriends who have cheated, lied, manipulated, etc. Because I don't want everybody to just assume that her ex-boyfriend Josh cheated on her or manipulated her. We don't know why they broke up, but, she's probably had more than one relationship. And when you have a string of bad relationships where you're betrayed or, disappointed, it can start to feel like, I don't deserve this. What's going on? Why me? Why do I keep running into these people and giving them all my love, and they just, betray me and hurt me? But I don't think it's a stretch to feel that Anna was probably still hurting from the breakup with Josh, and he was partially, an inspiration for that post. And she would post another TikTok a few days later on October 30th, just 3 days before she boarded a Carnival cruise. Quote, "You deserve to be happy, but if it ain't with me, then never mind," end quote. Now, we are going to hear from Josh again, but first let's go to November 2nd, 2025, the day Anna and several members of her extended family stepped on board the Carnival Horizon in Miami for a 6-night Caribbean cruise. Now, those who boarded the ship with her that day were her grandparents, Barbara and Jeffrey Kepner, her father, Christopher Kepner, and his wife, Chantel, along with her two minor children, Anna's 16-year-old stepbrother and 9-year-old stepsister. Now, there's also reports that Anna's two younger half-siblings were also present. I definitely know that her 14-year-old half-brother was there. At first, I couldn't confirm if her younger half-sister was there. So when I'm talking about her half-siblings, once again, I'm talking about the kids from Christopher Kepner's marriage to his second wife, Tabitha. Since writing this script, there have been more reports that both of Anna's half-siblings were on the cruise. But, I mean, that's neither here nor there. There was a lot of people getting on this cruise. Now, Anna had been on cruises with her family before, but according to her grandparents, this particular cruise was to be the beginning of a new tradition, a blended family getaway that would hopefully continue year after year. So the Carnival Horizon was scheduled to leave Miami and for the next 6 days head through the Caribbean with stops in Jamaica, Grand Cayman, and Cozumel. The ship left the port of Miami at around 3:30 p.m. and it planned to return on Saturday, November 8th. Now, reportedly, Anna would be sharing a stateroom with her 14-year-old half-brother and her 16-year-old step-brother, which right away does not sit right with me. It doesn't sound right to me, especially considering that Anna, at this point, hasn't even known the 16-year-old stepbrother all that long. I don't like the idea of kind of bringing children together and then just being like, this is your stepbrother, this is your stepsister, and expecting things to just be familial and for there not to be any, tension or like romantic feelings or attraction when you're talking about teenagers who have these raging hormones. I don't like the idea of putting a 16-year-old boy in the same cabin with these sleeping arrangements where he's with his 18-year-old stepsister that he's known about a year, right? It's just, are you going to look at her as a sister? Are you going to look at her as a sister? Are you going to look at her as an attractive 18-year-old girl? But according to the sources, the boys would sleep in bunk beds and then Anna would have her own bed. They're still all in the same room though, right? So Anna and the two boys were assigned to cabin 8367, which was on deck 8. And I did some research into this particular room, which is described as being 185 square feet, so not big, with a 2-guest standard occupancy. However, according to cruiseonline.com, this specific cabin that Anna and her stepbrother and her half-brother were staying in, it has 2 beds that can be pushed together and convert into a king-sized bed. And then some of these types of cabins have 1 or 2 additional bunks to accommodate more guests. And this website included a deck map and then an accompanying legend, so it was really helpful. And it looks like cabin 8367 has 2 twin beds and what's called 2 upper Pullmans. And as someone who's never set foot on a cruise ship in her life, I had to look up what that meant. I'd never heard the word upper Pullman. So the 2 twin beds would be the main beds on the floor, and they could be set up as 2 separate twins or pushed together to form a king. Pullman beds are hidden bunk beds stored in the wall or the ceiling, and usually a cabin steward will pull them down when the room is being turned down for the night. They're usually kept up during the day so that there's more room in the cabin. But when the Pullman beds are down, they sit right above the twin beds, like fold down bunk beds. So I'll show you a picture of how I would think this room would be set up to accommodate and sleep all 3 teenagers. So I feel like they probably would have pushed the 2 twin beds together to create one bigger bed that Anna would have slept on, and then each boy would be sleeping on their respective upper Pullman above her. That's not confirmed by anything other than my opinion and common sense. Anna could have slept in one of the twin beds right underneath one of the Pullman bunks, but personally, I would have felt more comfortable putting the 2 twin beds together in the middle of the room. That way there wasn't something like over my face when I was sleeping. This is why I can't sleep in bunk beds, because if I'm on the bottom bunk, I feel like it's like going to fall on me and crush me, or I'm just going to be suffocated by it for some reason, even though there's plenty of room. This is what I would have done. I would have pushed the 2 twin beds together in the middle, and then the boys could have slept on the above Pullman beds, and everybody kind of would have had their own space. So I go through this layout because I think it's good to know that there was a potential layout which would have allowed each teenager to have their own separate sleeping area, right? Like nobody would have to be sharing a bed or anything weird. Now, according to Anna's grandmother, Barbara Kepner, These sleeping arrangements had been decided on by Anna, her half-brother, and her stepbrother. So they weren't being told by the adults, hey, you guys are rooming together. They decided that this is what they wanted to do. This is how they wanted it to be set up and how they wanted to sleep. And Barbara Kepner said, quote, the 2 younger girls stayed with the parents, and then the 3 teenagers, they decided amongst themselves they wanted to stay in the room together. But we had a larger room, and we made it very clear that at any time, if they weren't getting along, they didn't want to be together, we had an extra bed in our room that they could come to, end quote. So this is Barbara Kepner saying that her and her husband, Jeffrey Kepner, Anna's grandparents, we have an extra bed in our room, so if you're not comfortable here, you can come and sleep in our room. That should have been the plan from the beginning, right? The 16-year-old boy and the 14-year-old boy should have roomed together, and then Anna should have slept on that extra bed in her grandparents' room. Or her father could have splurged and gotten her own cabin because she's an 18-year-old girl and she needs some privacy. But that's not what happened. So we're not going to talk too much about it, but that is what should have happened, in my opinion. So the next few days seemed to go by without any issues. November 3rd was a sea day, so the Horizon made no stops as it headed south to Ocho Rios, Jamaica. Now, this would have been a day to hang out by the pool, get some food, take in some entertainment, and just relax, because you're out at sea. There's nothing else to do but enjoy the cruise ship. So on November 4th, the Carnival Horizon would have docked in Jamaica in the early morning, and passengers would be allowed to get off the ship and explore or go on guided excursions, knowing they would have to be back on board by 5 p.m. so they could sail through the night to Georgetown, Grand Cayman. So the Horizon would have arrived to Georgetown early in the morning of November 5th. And once again, the cruise ship passengers would have several hours to do whatever they pleased while they were at this location. The next day, November 6th, the cruise ship was scheduled to arrive in Cozumel around 10:30 a.m. And all the passengers would have to be back on board by 6:30 p.m. that evening. We don't know if Anna and her family got off the ship at Cozumel. They would have no reason not to, but we do know they were all back on board together by dinner time as the Carnival Horizon glided back out to sea, heading back to Miami, Florida. So according to Barbara and Jeffrey Kepner, Anna was at dinner that night, but she left early to return to her cabin because she said her braces were bothering her, she wasn't feeling well, etc., etc. So this was not the last time that Anna's grandparents saw her, though.
We had dinner. Anna wasn't feeling well. She just said, Mima, I think I'm going to go back to my room for a little bit. And she must have felt better because she got dressed up and she came down. We were playing in the casino. She didn't win anything. And she said, Mima, I love you guys. I'll see you later. And we never saw her again after that.
Now, at this time, we do not know the exact time that Anna returned to her cabin after leaving her grandparents at the casino. And we also don't know how long after Anna got to her cabin that her half-brother and stepbrother decided to also head back to the cabin. But we know that all 3 did eventually return to their room that night. So the next day, November 7th, was a sea day as the Horizon made its way back to Florida. And that morning, Christopher Kepner and Chantal Hudson became worried when Anna did not show up for family breakfast. So Christopher began searching the ship for his daughter when he claims that over the public address system, he heard a medical emergency being announced, which caused him to rush to Anna's cabin. Now I'm going to stop here and I'm going to make a note that I'm going to bring back up later, and I want you to remember. I thought it was strange personally that when Anna didn't show up for breakfast, that Christopher Kepner would go searching the ship for her, and the first place he went was not her cabin. He's searching the ship for her, but he's not going to her room. Now, this could possibly be because Anna's stepbrother and half-brother did wake up that morning and make it to breakfast, and they told their parents, Christopher and Chantal, that Anna wasn't there in the morning, that when they woke up in the cabin that morning, Anna wasn't there. But still, maybe she left the cabin and went to get coffee and then went back to the cabin if she's not at breakfast. So it always just kind of is sticking in my head. Why did Christopher Kepner not go to Anna's cabin first to make sure she wasn't there and then go and search around the rest of the ship? So by the time Christopher Kepner rushed to Anna's cabin, because he heard this emergency alert being broadcast over the ship, he found that his 18-year-old daughter's body had already been discovered by a maid. Now, Anna Kepner had been found stuffed under a bed, wrapped in a blanket or a sheet, and covered with life jackets, like the floating ones, that you get on a cruise ship in case something happens like the Titanic and you need to go in the water. You have those life jackets. That's what she was covered with. Now, according to other passengers on the ship, the emergency announcement went out around 11 a.m., and it seems that Anna's body was found around that same time, because the time given initially for when it was known that Anna was gone was 11:17 a.m. So one of the cruise passengers, Tina Altman, said that the emergency call directed ship personnel to the 8th floor or deck, and that security later blocked off the area where Anna was found. Now, a letter from Carnival was later delivered to stateroom 8367, which, remember, is the cabin Anna was sharing with her stepbrother and half-brother. The letter says, quote, "We have made arrangements for you to have priority debarking on tomorrow morning. Authorities will be joining the ship first thing upon arrival to complete an investigation and will be in the area of your hallway. It could be noisy and disruptive, so we kindly ask that you be out of your stateroom by 7 a.m. We will have breakfast for you on Meridian D Annex, Deck 4, starboard side, and then our team will escort you off the ship ahead of other guests," end quote. You might think it's weird that anyone would still want to occupy that cabin after Anna was found there. And I don't think that stateroom 8367 was occupied at that time. I think that this letter was probably delivered to all the cabins in that hallway, letting the guests know that they should clear out by the time the ship arrived to Miami the following morning, because the FBI were going to be at the port waiting to board the ship and waiting to start their investigation into how the hell an 18-year-old girl had ended up dead, shoved under the bed of her stateroom. When the Carnival Horizon docked at the port of Miami on November 8th, FBI agents were waiting to board. Now, at this time right now, federal agents and law enforcement have not been super vocal about this case, but we kind of know what the FBI would do as soon as they got on that ship. They would immediately secure the scene and post someone at the door of cabin 8367 to stop all non-essential crew from entering and prevent tampering and cross-contamination. They would also want to log anyone who had entered the cabin since the discovery of Anna's body, including cruise ship staff, members of Anna's family, etc. The agents would then do a debriefing with the ship's security team to establish timelines, as well as to collect keycard logs and CCTV camera footage to begin the investigation. Before even talking to anyone in Anna's family or eyewitnesses, the FBI would secure all electronic evidence that they could. That means the keycard access logs for that cabin, as well as the keycard logs for cabins of Anna's immediate family. They would also want to retrieve the CCTV raw files, cabin phone logs, the ship's Wi-Fi login records with timestamps and device IDs, any internal security radio logs, and also stairwell and hallway motion logs if this particular cruise ship had those. Now, some do, some don't. This is, I think, the most important part of the investigation because it's going to establish a provable timeline. Carnival cruise ships usually have cameras in the hallways, in the elevators, in the lobby, and in the casino. In fact, a lot of cruise ships that don't even have expansive CCTV systems will make sure they have cameras in the casino. So it's good that Anna was in the casino with her grandparents that night, because we should at least for sure get footage of her leaving to go back to her cabin. And hopefully, if the Carnival Horizon has security cameras in the hallways and things, we should also have footage of her entering her cabin at the very least. It looks like the Carnival Horizon does have this kind of surveillance system, because we have gotten word from people who are close to the investigation that there is footage of who went into that cabin and who left. So Anna swiping her key card to enter the room will show what time she got back. Then, of course, the stepbrother and the half-brother, when they swipe their key cards to get back into the room, that's going to show what time they came back. And then if they ever left and had to return back to the room at some point. So then, of course, the FBI is going to go into the cabin. They're going to process the crime scene. That means taking pictures, dusting for prints, swabbing for DNA, and collecting any bedding, clothing, or blankets in the cabin. After an initial assessment, agents would separate and interview witnesses, Anna's family members, cabin stewards, housekeepers, any staff who had seen Anna the night before, etc. As I said, we haven't really gotten any information from the FBI or any law enforcement official about Anna's death, but we did get some information from Anna's family as they proceeded to give interviews to Good Morning America and other news sources. Now, from these bits and pieces, a picture starts to form that is jarring and hard to wrap your head around. On November 17th, someone named Martin Donahue posted on X saying, quote, "I need everyone's help on this. If you haven't heard this story, then you have been living under a rock. This is my niece, Anna Kepner. She was 18 and on a cruise with her dad, stepmom, and other family members. I cannot stay silent about this matter any longer. The stepmom's son killed her, stuffed her naked, beaten body in a sheet, and stuffed her under a bed and covered her with life jackets, then slept on that bed like nothing happened. He told his stepmom when no one could find Anna on the ship. So yes, they know who did this, and it sickens me that the father, Chris, remains silent about it. Please pass this on till maybe it gets to someone that can do something about it. If nothing is done, it will all come out on the 20th. At least that's what the stepmom has said after telling family if they talk before that, they will be banned from the remembrance of life for Anna. Please pass this so my family can get some closure and the people who did this and lied and stalled to tell the rest of us what happened when it did. Now you just look guilty of a cover-up," end quote. Okay, so I think he meant banned, not banded from the celebration of life, but banned from Anna's basically memorial. All right, so who is Martin Donahue? And is he actually Anna's uncle? Is he actually related to her? So in a Fox News article published November 19th, we hear from a man named Christopher Donahue, who's referred to as Anna's step-grandfather. So from context clues, I have figured out that this man, Christopher Donahue, is most likely the father of Tabitha, Christopher Kepner's second wife, because he, Christopher Donahue, described not seeing Anna a lot since her mom and father became estranged in 2023, which is when the divorce between Tabitha and Christopher Kepner happened. Now, this also leads to the supposition that Martin Donahue, who called himself Anna's uncle, is probably Tabitha's brother. So we have someone from Tabitha's family calling out Christopher Kepner and his new wife, Chantel, and pointing the finger at Chantel's 16-year-old son. He's also saying things about the way that Anna was found, that she was naked and beaten and covered with the life vest and the blankets. But from other sources, it does not say that Anna was naked. It does say that she was found with no signs of sexual abuse. It says that she looked almost pristine, basically. I think one of the interviews that Barbara Kepner gave said something like that, where they found out that Anna had been asphyxiated, but the rest of her body seemed to be untouched. So I don't know who's telling the truth here or whose depiction is more accurate, but these are the reports that we're getting. And Martin Donahue is also saying that the 16-year-old Chantel's son told Chantel what he did when they couldn't find Anna. And so Martin Donahue is saying both Chantel and Christopher Kepner know what happened, and they kind of have been keeping it away from the rest of the family and not telling people, and they're trying to cover something up. That's what Martin Donahue is alleging. And I think it does make sense that someone from Tabitha's family would be invested in what happened to Anna, as Anna was a part of their family for over a decade, and they'd known her since she was a baby, right? So Anna spent more time with Tabitha's family than she spent with Heather Wright's family, her biological mother, Heather Wright, and more time than she spent with her father's third wife, Chantel's family. So kind of, Tabitha's family would have been, I guess, feeling like real family for Anna, or they would have at least looked at her as somebody they viewed as, to be a part of their family because she was with them for so long. Now, previous to this sensational statement on X, Anna's family had been very vague about what had happened on that cruise ship. An ABC News article from November 9th states that Anna's family will remember her as a happy, bubbly, straight-A student with a bright future ahead, and it quotes them as saying, "When she walks into a room, she would light it up. If you were sad, she'd make you laugh. She would joke around and be the funniest little person in school." So the article also says that Anna's relatives find comfort in knowing that she lived her 18 years to the fullest, saying, quote, "She was the best child you could ever meet. We'll always remember her for who she was," end quote. So you can tell me if I'm off base. Tell me if I'm completely wrong. We can respectfully discuss it in the comment section, but this feels so off to me, right? remember that Anna's being found on the morning of November 8th. They're making the statement on November 9th. And if you read it and you didn't know what happened to Anna Kepner, you didn't know how she died or how she was found, you might think, hey, Anna died accidentally, like maybe she slipped on a wet floor and hit her head, or, her appendix suddenly burst or whatever. It doesn't seem like these things would be the things said about an 18-year-old girl who was clearly murdered, right? Murdered, and then her body was concealed. You wouldn't say these things about an 18-year-old girl who was found under such horrifying and bizarre circumstances. Like, oh, they're just really happy that she lived her 18 years to the fullest. Like, she had her whole life ahead of her, but at least she had a great time those 18 years. We're always going to remember her for the bright light that she was. It doesn't feel like there's the anger, the sadness, the what the hell happened? How did this happen? There doesn't seem to be that coming from these statements. And you might say, well, they had a PR person write these for them, or maybe they had their lawyer write them for them. But I also have to be honest here and say that the interviews and statements that Anna's family have started giving to the media, they got even more strange and confusing. So Anna's biological mother, Heather Wright, came out and informed the world that she had not been told about her daughter's death. She found out from the internet.
I found out through Google, because I ended up Googling it, because all the information the only information I had was my daughter was on a cruise.
So that was Heather Wright, Anna's biological mother, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. So let's go back to November 17th, the same day Martin Donahue posted on X, because something else important happened that day. Remember, I mentioned earlier that Christopher Kepner's third wife, Chantal Hudson, was previously married and had 3 children from that marriage. Well, at the time of the cruise, Chantal and her ex-husband were still going through a pretty, intense custody battle over their 2 minor children. And on November 17th, Thomas Hudson filed an emergency motion, which set into place a series of events and gives us some insight about internal family dynamics. Thomas Hudson filed an emergency motion for temporary relief, asking the court to urgently intervene in the custody situation. The filing itself references 3 children, 1 adult child who has already turned 18 while he was living with his father, Thomas, and 2 minor children, a 16-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl. Now, although the name of this 16-year-old boy has been public in many online sources, I'm not going to use his name in the video. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to call the 16-year-old stepbrother of Anna Kepner Dan. Now, according to this document, the older child, the adult child of Chantal and Thomas Hudson, had reported a violent altercation that involved himself, his mother Chantal, and another person who is referred to as Chantal's paramour, but who has since been identified as Christopher Kepner. And a lot of people have questioned the legal use of the term paramour, since that usually means a romantic partner who Chantal would not be legally married to. And allegedly, she and Christopher got married in December of 2024. So this has caused many people to question whether or not the two are actually legally married. I think it doesn't really matter. And either it's true that they're not legally married, even though some people have been sharing screenshots of a marriage certificate, or at the time of this alleged violent altercation, they were not yet married. So Christopher Kepner would have still been considered her paramour and not her legal husband. Either way, I don't think it makes much of a difference, but I've seen some people question this online, and maybe some of you are questioning the same thing, so I thought I would address it. So the adult child of Chantal and Thomas Hudson, he claims that this violent altercation caused him to not want to live with his mother anymore, and that is when he moved in with his father, Thomas. Now, Thomas Hudson also states in this filing that the other 2 children are currently living with Chantal, and we know that Chantal had moved in with Christopher Kepner, so we also know that this means 16-year-old Dan and his little sister were also living with Christopher Kepner and Anna Kepner. Thomas Hudson alleged that Chantal has denied his court-ordered parenting time with the 2 younger kids. He alleged that Chantal is actively trying to alienate these 2 children from him. Thomas claims that he has not been allowed to have input into the children's lives, and his lack of involvement has negatively impacted the children. Thomas also mentions that Chantal took her kids on a cruise with her partner, a cruise which not only left the state but the country, and she didn't get the proper permission to do so. Now, here is where things heat up in regards to Anna Kepner's death. The petition states, quote, "The 16-year-old child is now a suspect in the death of the stepchild during the cruise." End quote. The document goes on to say, quote, "The 16-year-old's future has been put in jeopardy because of the choices made by the respondent, Chantel." End quote. So Thomas Hudson feels that his youngest child, his 9-year-old daughter, is at immediate risk of abuse, abandonment, or neglect in the care of her mother, Chantel, and he requested that the court place his 9-year-old child in his care and address the placement of the 16-year-old Dan. So I'm going to pause here and also address the placement of Dan, because according to the filing, Thomas Hudson has some knowledge that Dan had become a suspect in Anna Kepner's death, and that Dan was not staying with his mother, but with a third party. That brings us back to November 8th, when the Carnival Horizon got back to Miami and FBI agents boarded to conduct their investigation. At that time, according to Anna's grandparents, Barbara and Jeffrey Kepner, the family was questioned, including 16-year-old Dan. Barbara Kepner has claimed that she was able to sit in on a portion of Dan's interview with the FBI, and she heard him say in his own words that he doesn't remember what happened. She's also claimed that she believes him. Well, she believes that to him what he said was his truth, and she personally saw that Dan was an emotional mess after Anna's death.
And has he said anything to you about what happened?
I heard him, in his own words, say he does not remember what happened.
Anna's grandmother says she sat in on a portion of the stepbrother's interview with the FBI.
He was an emotional mess. He couldn't even speak. He couldn't believe what had happened.
You know I don't like to make assumptions. Well, some of you may think I do, and that I throw my opinion around like I haven't put a ton of thought and research into it, but I promise you that is not the case. I really do put a lot of consideration into the things I say, but you know that I do need to say how I feel. And what I feel is that Anna's grandmother, Barbara Kepner, and the things she says are not sitting right with me. I feel unsettled. I feel confusion. I feel that her statements are contradictory, and I'm going to explain why and show you why. Barbara Kepner said she was able to hear some of Dan's interview. He claimed he doesn't remember a lot of what happened, and he's an emotional mess, right? Barbara said, quote, "I believe to him that is his truth," end quote. But Barbara also has other information that has not been publicly released by law enforcement, information she claims the FBI told Christopher Kepner, information about Anna Kepner's cause of death.
The FBI contacted my son and family and told us her cause of death was asphyxiation.
Anna's grandmother said one possibility they're considering whether it was caused by a so-called bar hold, an arm across the neck.
You take the elbow like this. They said when they took her body to the medical examiner's office, it was in perfect condition.
Kepner telling ABC News they were told their granddaughter's body showed no signs of sexual assault or drugs or alcohol in her system.
So through Barbara Kepner, we find out that Anna's cause of death was asphyxiation, possibly through the use of what they called an arm bar, which you then saw her illustrate, which once again, in the casual and nonchalant way she's talking about her granddaughter's death and the way she showed the cameras what an arm bar looked like, it's just unsettling. It's just unsettling. But in the case of asphyxiation, when someone describes an arm bar, they're typically meaning the attacker uses their forearm to press across the victim's neck, often from the front or slightly from the side, and then they're applying enough pressure or force to compress the airway or the carotid arteries. I was curious as to how long the attacker would have had to have pressed on Anna's neck in this way to cause her death. And it's actually a lot longer than you would think, right? With effective neck compression, sure, loss of consciousness can occur in about 5 to 15 seconds if blood flow is significantly blocked. But it takes between 3 to 5 minutes of complete oxygen deprivation before irreversible brain damage starts. And then death can occur within 3 to 6 minutes. Now that means Anna would probably have lost consciousness long before she died, and the person who was applying this arm bar would have had more than enough time to realize what they were doing and stop. You know, when she went unconscious and they were like, oh shit, like I went too hard or I'm doing too much or what have I done here, right? But based on, you know, what we know about asphyxiation and what we know about the timing, she would have gone unconscious minutes before she died, but the pressure would have had to have remained on her neck after she went unconscious for death to follow. So I'm just going to put that there. Barbara Kepner was asked about the court filings in the Hudson custody case, and she says this.
Do you think he had anything to do with Anna's death?
I mean, he was in a room with her. He was the only one seen coming and going. So I can't accuse him because I don't know what happened in that room. But the summation would be that he did something.
So Barbara Kepner literally says Dan was in the room with Anna. He was the only one seen coming and going from that room, that cabin. This information, like the information about the cause of Anna's death, if it's true, clearly did come from the FBI, who had already checked CCTV and pulled keycard swipe data from Anna's cabin. So what I'm saying is, would Barbara Kepner go on like Good Morning America or these news outlets and say the FBI told my son Christopher Kepner that this is how Anna died and that this was the person who was seen coming and going from the cabin and nobody else was? If she was completely making it up, I don't think that would happen. Why? What would be the motive for that? So we're going to switch gears quickly, but we will come back to Barbara Kepner and the details of Chantel's custody battle with her ex-husband in a few minutes. So for now, we're going to talk about someone I've mentioned briefly, Anna's ex-boyfriend. His name is Josh Chu, and he's 15 years old. So Josh has come out and said that he broke up with Anna 6 months before the cruise, but the last time they had talked was 3 weeks before the cruise. So they were maybe still on good terms, maybe trying to be friends, maybe trying to rekindle, I don't know. But according to Josh, Anna was not a huge fan of her father's new wife, Chantel, or Chantel's family. Josh said, quote, "She told me that she was uncomfortable with them being at the house because she didn't fully know who they were, that their dad had just met this woman not even like a year ago, and she doesn't really like her. She has an attitude most of the time and was very controlling over her. But I told her, they're going to be your parents at the end of the day, you know?" End quote. Now, it appears to me that Anna's half-siblings, her brother and sister from Christopher Kepner's marriage to Tabitha, both lived in the house with Anna at least part of the time. Then when Christopher and Chantel hooked up, Chantel moved into Christopher's home with her 2 kids, including 16-year-old Dan. Now, Josh claims that Anna's bedroom was actually in the dining room of the house, and this is supported by Anna's own TikToks where you can see her filming, and in the background, you can see that this is true. I don't want to play the specific video I'm referring to because Anna's 14-year-old half-brother is in it, and as far as I can see, they had a very good and close relationship, and I just don't want to be putting him out there like that. But in one video, the camera does like a 360, and you can see a bed and a garment rack with Anna's clothes on it. And as the camera turns, you can also see the entrance to the kitchen and what looks to be a desk or an at-home office setup. So I don't know if Anna was always relegated to the dining room or if that decision was made when there were, 2 to 4 other kids in the house and no bedrooms were available for Anna. But either way, Anna was an 18-year-old girl sleeping in the dining room of this house where multiple other children or minors under the age of 18 lived. So Josh claims that 9 months before Anna's death, she was in bed and she was on FaceTime with him when her 16-year-old stepbrother Dan came in. Josh said, quote, "Anna was laying down and he walked in there and tried to get on top of her, but he got caught by me in the process of it. I was like, what the hell are you doing in her room?" Then he got scared and ran away. And I heard his footsteps running through the house because he got caught. End quote. Josh also said that Anna had complained about Dan making her uncomfortable and she would often stay overnight with friends to avoid him. Josh said, quote, "She was too scared to tell anybody because that one time that he said that if she said anything about getting on top of her, he'd do something to her." End quote. We also heard from Josh's father, Steve Weston, who said that 16-year-old Dan was obsessed with Anna and he relentlessly pursued her. Quote, "He's infatuated, attracted to her like crazy. He always wanted to date her." End quote. Now, both Josh and his father, Steve, said that Josh had tried to alert Anna's parents to this, but he was dismissed because they didn't want to believe him. Anna's aunt, Crystal Wright, who's the sister of Anna's biological mother, Heather, has also said something of the same nature. She said that Josh, the ex-boyfriend of Anna, tried to inform Christopher Kepner, Anna's father, and his wife, Chantel, about the FaceTime incident earlier this year. And Crystal Wright said, quote, "Chris knew about the creepiness of the stepson," end quote. But according to Barbara Kepner, Anna's grandmother and Christopher Kepner's mother, there were no issues between Anna and Dan, stating, quote, "They were just like brother and sister, two peas in a pod. I know that those two kids cared about each other in the right way," end quote. So here's where I'm talking about things not making a lot of sense. How can you say that, Barbara Kepner? How can you say that after also acknowledging that your granddaughter was murdered, that someone put their arm on her neck until she died, and that Dan was the only one in and out of the cabin? I just can't comprehend it. They loved each other in the right way, but you have stated yourself that all of these things add up to 16-year-old Dan probably being the perpetrator of this crime. What's going on?
Anna's grandparents say she and her stepbrother were close.
They were just like brother and sister.
What else could you tell me about him?
That he was a good student.
Played soccer.
He played soccer, very quiet young man. He had demons, I think, in his past, and he was trying to deal with those.
It almost seems like they know Dan did this, but they aren't mad at him because they felt like he was a good kid just fighting some demons. And I'm sorry, because you've known Anna for her entire life, 18 years, and you've known Dan for what, maybe a little over a year, 2 years, if I'm being generous. If it was me in this situation, it doesn't matter how good at soccer Dan was, or how many A's he got in school, or how sweet he seemed to be, or how many peas he had in his pod. Like, I would be pissed. I would be really, really angry at Dan. And I'd be angry at myself for not paying attention and seeing the red flags and putting Anna in that position as a trusted adult where I wasn't paying enough attention to see that there was something there I should have seen. And I would want justice for my granddaughter, right? I wouldn't be like, yeah, he's a good kid, just got some demons. Like, this is not making sense to me. So Barbara was also asked, what she and the rest of Anna's family hope for now?
I hope that we can heal. Whatever happened in that room, the only person responsible is the person that was in the room with Anna.
What does justice look like for your family?
Whatever the law says, I'm not going to advocate for anything more or anything less. And that will be for the courts to decide.
Where is the outrage? Where is the advocacy for 18-year-old Anna, who was forced to open her home and her life to perfect strangers, who was put into a position of danger, and she had no say in it? Where is it? Where's the outrage? Barbara said straight out, the only person responsible is the person that was in the room with Anna. She also said the 16-year-old Dan was the only person seen coming and going from that cabin, making him the only person in the room with Anna. So I repeat, it seems like they know what happened and who's responsible, but there doesn't seem to be a desire to place any responsibility or accountability on that person or on the adults who placed Anna in this position. They just seem to be saying, wow, this is a really unfortunate turn of events. Anna was so great. She'll be sorely missed. Now let's leave it up to the justice system. Whatever they decide, I'm good with it. The response from the adults in this case is just way too nonchalant for me, okay? Way too nonchalant. Let's go back to Anna's ex-boyfriend, Josh, who claims he was aware that 16-year-old Dan was a problem. He tried to warn the adults in Anna's life that Dan was a massive red flag, but they didn't listen. Josh also claims that after getting back from the cruise, Anna's 14-year-old half-brother reached out to him, contacted him, and gave him some information. So we now know that after Anna went up to the cabin on the evening of November 6th, her 14-year-old half-brother and 16-year-old stepbrother also went up for the night at some point. Reportedly, when they got to the cabin, the 14-year-old changed his clothes and then left the cabin again to go and take some pictures of the cruise ship with his phone, probably for like social media or to send to his friends. And he left Anna and Dan alone in the cabin at that point. Now, Josh says that Anna's 14-year-old half-brother told him that when he got back to the cabin later on, the door was locked. He tried to get in, but the 16-year-old wasn't letting him in, and then he heard what sounded like a violent altercation happening inside. Josh said, quote, he heard him yelling at her in a harmful way, like, shut the hell up and stuff like that, and that's when he knew something was going on. There was something going on. Something was banging around, like chairs were getting thrown around the room, but he wouldn't talk to me anymore. He said the FBI told them that if they talk, they'll get arrested because it's tampering with an investigation or something, end quote. Did the FBI tell the 14-year-old that? Probably not like in that way. Like, 14-year-old, if you say anything to anyone, we're going to come and arrest you, put you in like some underground prison. No, they're probably just saying, hey, it's might hurt the investigation if you talk and say things that are not publicly known. Even though Anna's family kind of seems to be doing that. Like Barbara Kepner's over here telling everybody everything. Telling everybody everything. The autopsy, which hasn't been made public yet, things like that. But I digress. We can wonder all day and night why the 14-year-old half-brother didn't go and get someone, why he didn't tell someone at that time what he was hearing. First of all, we don't know that he didn't tell someone. And secondly, we don't know what the dynamic was normally like. Did Anna and Dan often get into arguments? Did Dan often fly off the handle and start throwing temper tantrums, throwing things? Was the 14-year-old brother used to this toxic way of Dan behaving with Anna, and so he didn't think anything of it? I don't know, but that could be. Or maybe he did tell someone and we just haven't heard about it yet. We also don't know how or when the 14-year-old got back into the cabin for the night, but eventually he must have, because he went to bed and he woke up the next morning. Now, I did read somewhere that when he found the door locked, the 14-year-old left and came back a little while later when the door was unlocked, and then he went inside and Anna wasn't there, but he assumed she'd just gone back out into the cruise ship for the night, and so he went to bed. And then when he woke up the next morning, she still wasn't there. And that's probably when the 14-year-old half-brother went down to breakfast and told his parents, like, yeah, she wasn't in bed last night and she wasn't there this morning. I don't know how reliable that source is, but if there is any truth to it, it's likely that by the time he got back to the cabin and went to bed, Anna was already dead and stuffed under the bed. The death certificate, which has since been obtained by ABC News, states that Anna died from asphyxiation. Her death has been ruled a homicide, and the date of the injury was listed as November 6th. So a lot of people are placing Anna's time of death as November 7th, around like 11 a.m. That's not an accurate time. I think that's just when she was found, basically, when her body was found. And the actual time of death, or the actual date of the injury, was listed as November 6th, the night before her body was found. All right, so now let's return to the custody case of Chantel and Thomas Hudson, because after Thomas Hudson filed his motion on November 17th, Chantel filed a response the following day. Now, unlike Thomas's very detailed motion, Chantel's is more strategic, I think. It contains only what her attorney feels is necessary to delay the upcoming hearing, because they have a hearing coming up. And now Chantel is saying, I can't attend this hearing. Basically, we have to reschedule this hearing. Now, her motion, or her filing, it does rebut her ex-husband's claims. So Chantel's firing is saying that she cannot and should not testify at the hearing that's scheduled for December 17th due to the FBI investigation involving her son. The document states, quote, respondent, Chantel, has been advised through discussions with FBI investigators and her attorneys that a criminal case may be initiated against one of her minor children of this instant action, end quote. The instant action is basically the motion that Thomas filed, saying he wanted some changes made to the custody agreement. He wants his 9-year-old daughter to be put in his custody, and they call it an instant action because they want it to move fast, basically. So essentially, Chantel is telling the court that if she testifies now, anything she says could incriminate her or her minor child, and therefore she must invoke her Fifth Amendment rights. The document states, quote, any testimony the respondent may give, either written or oral, could be prejudicial to her or her adolescent child, end quote. So Chantel's argument is simple, right? The FBI investigation is active. Her minor child is under threat of possible criminal charges. Anything she says in family court could be used in that criminal case. Therefore, she is legally entitled to stay silent. Therefore, the scheduled hearing must be postponed until the criminal investigation has been concluded, which, as you know, could take quite a while.
Ms. Athanison, would you like to be heard with regard to your response, as well as time to put on your side of the case?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. There is currently an FBI investigation as well with regard to the 16-year-old, and as well as there was a DCF involvement, and there's a DCF open investigation on the father in this case. The FBI has cleared my client from any wrongdoing. She's not considered a suspect in this matter at all. I would have difficulty in them putting the 16-year-old on the stand because I don't want anything done that would incriminate the young man. Mom immediately after the incident, he was hospitalized, and then when released from the hospital, mom and dad participated too. They signed a stipulation basically allowing him to live with mom's relative, and they're getting counseling and so forth for him. So I don't see that there's any emergency relative to the youngest child.
So what you heard there is Chantel's lawyer going over everything, and the lawyer, she says that once the Carnival Horizon docked and Dan had been questioned, he was hospitalized. Now we'll come to find out that he was hospitalized for a psychiatric observation, at least that's what's been reported, and then he was released to stay with a family member of his mother's in the Hernando County area, which Chantel and her husband, or her ex-husband Thomas Hudson, were originally living when the divorce happened, and then Chantel moved her kids to Titusville with Christopher Kepner. So Chantel also indicated that her son had a scheduled appointment with a psychiatrist in early December. I also do want to mention that in her filing, Chantel did respond to some of Thomas's claims. For instance, she says that their oldest child was removed from her care by Thomas without her consent, even after Thomas had signed and agreed to a modification of the parenting plan to allow Chantel to move with all three of her children to Broward County, Titusville. I think it's a little weird to say, I mean, the kid was 18, the adult child, he's 18 by this point. So I don't know if it's Thomas stealing him from her, or if the kid's just 18 and he's like, I'm an adult, I can choose where I live. Now, Chantel also claimed that Thomas allowed his oldest child to live with his teenage girlfriend, the oldest child's girlfriend, not Thomas's teenage girlfriend. And Thomas then hindered Chantel's ability to see their oldest child, claiming that the child did not want to see Chantel. So the document also says that there was no violent altercation between this oldest child and Chantel. Quote, in fact, the father attempted to file a petition for protection against domestic violence against the mother, claiming the mother tried to hit the eldest child of the parties while in the vehicle. But the court denied said petition as the mother and the stepfather were simply preventing the child from his attempt to jump out of the car as he wanted to stay in Hernando County so as to be with his girlfriend, end quote. And I think that's fair. The kid's 18. He's got friends. He probably went to high school in Hernando County. He's got friends there, a girlfriend. He doesn't want to uproot his life and go move with his mother and her new husband to a completely different county, a completely different place. That's most likely why he wanted to stay with his father. Now, Chantel also claims that there is currently an open DCF investigation against Thomas Hudson due to issues of domestic violence against the youngest two children. Chantel also requested that the judge seal the custody case, and I think it's pretty obvious why she made this request, because anything that she or anyone says in family court with this custody battle, it could be used by prosecutors in a criminal case, one that could be brought against her son. Anything seen publicly could then influence the media coverage, and it also could affect Dan's juvenile status because minors under investigation are typically entitled to heightened privacy and protection from stigma before any adjudication happens. However, if the custody case stays open to the public, court filings can go online, as they already have in this custody case. Journalists can sit in on the hearings, and details about Dan's behavior, mental state, or involvement in Anna's death might be publicly discussed. And let's be honest, this situation, any way you look at it, is intensely damaging to Chantel's reputation. And it does seem like it might hurt the ongoing custody case she's already embroiled in. So given all of that, the judge still refused to seal the case, and this was not a surprise to me. This is Florida. Judges in Florida rarely seal custody cases because Florida has one of the strongest open records policies in the country. They're called the Sunshine Laws, and they put extreme limits on when a judge is allowed to seal a case. You know, people who make the laws, they feel that the people of Florida who pay the taxes have the right to have access to this information. So unless there's a clear danger to a minor or a need to protect privileged information, the judge kind of needs to keep the records public. Like they don't seal these cases a lot. So at this point, the court is protecting the name of the 16-year-old by using only initials in the filings. But the custody hearing may end up shedding light on a homicide investigation, which is why I think Chantel was like, hey, we got to reschedule this hearing in December until after the investigation is finished, because I think that she doesn't want to have herself or other people asked questions under oath, that the answers to those questions may affect what's going on with her son's potential criminal case. Basically, at this point, this custody battle is not a private or domestic matter any longer, because an 18-year-old girl is dead, a 16-year-old step-sibling is a suspect, and judges do not like shutting down public access when a case intersects with a criminal investigation involving the murder of a teenager. You know, it's like, if we get some information from this custody case, then we get some information. You have to answer honestly. So answer honestly. Now, on November 25th, Christopher Kepner was subpoenaed to appear and testify at a hearing that was scheduled for December 5th. Now, you might ask, why Christopher is being asked to appear in court in relation to a custody battle between his wife and her ex-husband. And in my opinion, this was actually a very smart legal strategy and move made by Thomas Hudson and his attorneys, because in family court, Christopher becomes a witness to the environment Chantel's children were in, the parenting decisions that either he or Chantel made, his own actions or lack of supervision, maybe on that cruise, maybe in general, the factual timeline of the cruise, the dynamics between the children, his wife's conduct, his stepchildren's behavior, so much more. He can be questioned about all of these things because this is a custody case and this is where his children are living. So yes, he can be asked all those questions. And if Christopher testifies that the teenagers on the cruise ship were not being well supervised, AKA he didn't know what the kids were doing on the ship at all times. And there was some talk about, was the 16-year-old drinking alcohol? And then Chantel's lawyer was like, no, we have video surveillance. The 16-year-old is not drinking alcohol. But, there's questions about who was watching these kids. Like, yes, Anna's 18, but the brothers are 14 and 16. So is Christopher Kepner, is Chantel Hudson, are they letting these 14-year-old, 16-year-old, 18-year-old kind of like have free reign of the cruise ship all on their own? They don't know what they're doing. They're not supervising them. This can be used by Thomas Hudson to show that his kids are not safe with Chantel. Christopher would probably also be asked about Dan's behavior. Were there issues? Had Dan and Anna had conflict before? Was there tension or violence in the home, etc.? Obviously, Chantel and her legal team, they don't want Christopher Kepner to take the stand. They don't want this at all. Now, Chantel has already invoked her Fifth Amendment rights, which protects her from giving testimony that could incriminate herself or expose her to criminal charges or, put her in jeopardy through association. But what most people don't realize is that the Fifth Amendment also protects a witness from giving testimony that could help incriminate someone they are legally responsible for, like a minor child. And it's actually kind of complicated. It's not in the way you think. It's not like a wife can't testify against her husband and, she's allowed to protect or stuff like that. This is more like you can plead the Fifth because answering the question might make you look bad, right? So courts actually recognize this as parental self-incrimination risk, because if your child is charged with a violent crime, you as the parent could be investigated for any number of reasons: neglect, failure to protect, contributing to delinquency, etc. So basically, testifying about her child could absolutely incriminate Chantel, so she can plead the Fifth in this situation, which she did, which is probably why Thomas Hudson's lawyers are trying to get Christopher Kepner on the stand. However, when attempts were made to serve Christopher with a subpoena, he was being a bit evasive, some might say. The process server, Leslie Kinsey, attempted to give him the subpoena at 10:09 a.m. on November 28th. And in a court document, Kinsey said, quote, "A SUV vehicle was present in the driveway, which was observed to be running upon approach. The windows on the aforementioned vehicle were heavily tinted, making it difficult to determine if there were any occupants inside. A posted no trespassing sign was posted in front of the residence. Proceeding to the front entrance, this process server noted the presence of a a Ring doorbell camera. An initial knock on the door yielded no response, followed by the activation of the Ring device again with no answer. After waiting several minutes, this server returned to her vehicle. While passing the running vehicle in the driveway, she inspected both the front and driver's side window and knocked to ascertain occupants. The vehicle did not appear to be occupied. This process server contacted her supervisor and provided the license plate information for the vehicle present. Records indicate the vehicle is registered to the witness, Christopher Purcell Kepner, at the given address. While stationed at the street, the process server observed the SUV's lights and horn activate as though it was being remotely locked. End quote. So then Leslie, the process server, she went back to the front door. She knocked again. She rang the doorbell again. And again, no answer. She identified herself as a process server. She said, listen, I'm not with the press. I'm not with the police. I'm just here to deliver you a subpoena. And still no response, no answer. She even showed her identification at the Ring doorbell camera so that, whoever was inside looking at the camera would be sure she wasn't somebody from the press pretending to be a process server, et cetera, et cetera. Still, no one answered. So at 10:29 a.m., Leslie left the subpoena under the windshield wiper of the still running SUV and she left. But she returned around 11:07 a.m. And when she got back, the SUV was gone and Leslie found no sign of subpoena anywhere. She looked in the driveway, the yard, the street, to see had he taken the subpoena off and threw it out, or had the wind blown it off, whatever. So this is what is called avoidance of service. And if Christopher doesn't show up to court on December 5th, the judge will have no choice but to assume that he's being intentionally non-compliant and disrespecting the court, which may lead to a civil contempt finding, maybe even a bench warrant. It depends on the judge. Now, what it will certainly do is put Christopher Kepner in an even worse position legally because judges really hate this. They don't like when people do this. They don't reward it. Courts are going to interpret this as Christopher being evasive at the least, and they might even see it as him potentially hiding something. Now, Christopher can show up to court on December 5th, and he can plead the 5th, as his wife Chantal has done, but at this time, he has not done that yet. As far as I know, I am actually filming this on December 4th. So in my opinion, Christopher could have been avoiding the process server because he didn't want the media to capture photos of him being served, and he has every intention of going to court and answering any and all questions honestly. But let's say he was avoiding the process server because he didn't want to go to court and he didn't want to answer questions. In that case, my question would be, why? Right? Because recently Christopher has talked to People magazine, and while he did not confirm or deny any knowledge about his stepson's possible involvement in his daughter Anna's murder, he said, quote, "I do not stand behind what my stepson has done. I want him to face the consequences. I will be fighting to make sure that does happen." End quote. Christopher was also asked whether he believes his stepson is responsible for Anna's death, and he responded, quote, "I cannot say that he is responsible, but I can't decline. He was the only one that was in the room, and the FBI has an ongoing investigation in which they will have to provide the evidence to say that he did do it or he did not do this." End quote. I mean, the 16-year-old stepson being the only one in the room is probably pretty strong evidence in my book, but that's neither here nor there. So Christopher Kepner seems to believe that Dan is responsible for Anna's death, even if he didn't say it straight out. He did say he doesn't stand behind what his stepson did. He wants him to face the consequences. He said he will be fighting to make sure that happens. So you would assume he'd have no issue going to court and answering any questions because Dan isn't his kid. He shouldn't be worried about incriminating Dan, especially if he believes that Dan killed his daughter Anna, right? There are a few reasons Christopher could want to avoid testifying in this custody case. First, even if he does fully believe that Dan did this, taking the stand could still incriminate Christopher himself. If he testifies to what the sleeping arrangements were, whether he knew about prior inappropriate behavior, such as if he's asked whether or not Anna's boyfriend Josh informed him about the FaceTime incident, if he's asked how long he left the teenagers unsupervised for, then he potentially becomes exposed. Christopher could still emotionally want justice for Anna while actively trying to protect himself. His testimony could also harm his wife Chantal if he answers questions under oath about her parenting or supervision, Dan's behavior or red flags, things like that. Christopher could help Thomas win custody. He could hurt Chantal's legal position. He could cause her to lose her children. And I can't imagine that their relationship would be super peaceful or conflict free after that. I mean, this is his current marriage. Dan is his stepson legally. His marriage, his living situation, his younger children all depend on Christopher not blowing things up in family court. Christopher could be stuck between justice for Anna, loyalty to Chantal, feeling that he has to protect himself and the family he has left, and trying to limit or mitigate legal exposure. I mean, depending on what happened on that cruise ship and how much Christopher Kepner knows, this testimony could go very badly for him. If he contradicts something he told the FBI early on, if he reveals something he hasn't disclosed to law enforcement previously, if he gives a timeline that shows he failed to check on the kids, it could all go very badly for him. He could be blamed. He could be charged with something, or he could lose his own kids. I can only speak for myself, though, and what I believe I would do if I was in Christopher's shoes. And the fact is, I wouldn't really be concerned with my stepson's fate or if my wife would be mad at me. My daughter's gone, and it seems that I believe the person who took her from me and from this world is someone I brought into her life, someone I let into my home and welcomed into my family. I'm going to want that person to face the highest degree of punishment possible. At that point, Chantal's ongoing and drawn-out custody battle is not going to be high on my priority list, and protecting Dan would be number one on the shit I'm never going to do list. Personally, that's just me. Now, before we go any further, I want to address something that keeps coming up online in reference to this case. It's circulating widely, and avoiding it won't make it disappear. There are rumors that years ago, before his divorce from Anna's mother, Heather, Christopher Kepner had an inappropriate or even sexual relationship with the teenage babysitter who later became his second wife, a woman named Tabitha Donahue. Here's what I can actually confirm, though. In December of 2008, a woman named Christina Donahue, who is Tabitha's mother, filed a petition for a sexual violence injunction against Christopher in Brevard County. That petition was filed on behalf of a minor. But, and this is important, the publicly available court record shows the injunction was not granted, and there's no publicly released evidence explaining the full context behind the filing or why it was dismissed. 3 years later, in 2011, Christopher did marry Tabitha, and that fact, combined with the 2008 filing, has fueled a lot of speculation. But I want to be very clear. There's no evidence I can find that proves Christopher had a sexual relationship with Tabitha while she was a minor, and there's no documentation establishing that any inappropriate behavior occurred. The only verifiable fact is that a petition was filed and then dismissed. Petitions for injunctions can be denied for many reasons that do not necessarily mean the allegations were true or false. So while the timing and circumstances have raised questions online, the truth is that based on the available public records, at this time, we simply do not have enough information to know what actually did or did not happen back then. And I think it's important to be responsible here, acknowledging what exists on paper, but also acknowledging what we don't know and what has not been proven. That being said, I did some deeper research as I have access to a computer program that allows me to see some background search details, and I found a profile for someone named Tabitha Lynn Harper, who has also gone by the name Tabitha Lynn Kepner. This person has lived in Titusville, Florida, and her possible relatives include Anna Kepner, Christopher Kepner, and Barbara Kepner. So I think it's the right Tabitha. And her age is given as being 34 years old in 2025, with her date of birth being November of 1991. It also looks like Christopher Kepner's date of birth is May of 1984, which makes him 41 years old right now. Some quick math tells us that Christopher is 7 years older than Tabitha, and at the time of their marriage in 2011, she would have been 19. She would have been turning 20 the following November. So that means Christopher would have been 27 when they got married. Now, let's go to December of 2008, when Tabitha's mother, Christina, filed a sexual violence injunction against Christopher Kepner. At that time, Tabitha would have been 17 years old, having just celebrated her birthday the month before. So she was freshly and newly 17. The rumors going around state that Tabitha was 15 years old when the inappropriate conduct with Christopher Kepner began, but she was 17 at the time the injunction was filed. It's important to keep in mind that the filing date only tells us when the petition was submitted, not when the alleged conduct occurred. We would have to have the actual details of the petition in order to know when the incident occurred. The incident could have occurred days before, weeks before, even years before the filing. I would like to point out, though, that I do find it a bit weird and creepy that when it was filed and Tabitha was 17, Christopher Kepner was 24 years old. And knowing that the two eventually did get married and that she probably was his babysitter for his kids, that doesn't settle well with me. But once again, I have no evidence of anything. These are all speculations, rumors based on some actual solid evidence, but not totally proven yet. And we don't have all the information, which I think is important to have before we start calling people things and pointing fingers. But while we're talking about people whose behavior doesn't settle well with me, let's redirect our attention to Heather Wright, Anna's biological mother. Remember earlier in this video, we talked about how Anna and her mother were estranged, and they had been for quite a while. Now, at the age of 18, Anna seemed to still feel very upset and hurt by the relationship with her mother, or lack thereof, and it was something she vented about on TikTok more than a few times. Also, remember that I talked about how Heather Wright has her own side of the story and her own reasons for why she and Anna did not have a close relationship. While we are going to talk about that, I want you to understand that we are talking about it because I find it odd that Heather, who just lost her daughter in a horrible and tragic way, would take this moment and this opportunity to make the narrative about herself, defending herself, trying to give reasons for why she was not an active participant in her own child's life. I don't see the purpose for it. And to me, it's just another example of how the adults in Anna's life were and are more concerned with themselves, what they want, and how they look to other people than they were with Anna's happiness and well-being when she was alive. So we heard from Heather Wright briefly already, describing how no one even called her to let her know Anna was gone.
My ex-husband did not try to contact me at all whatsoever to let me know that my daughter died. I found out because I live in Oklahoma, and my youngest son goes to school with a good friend of mine's nephew, and he told her nephew that his sister was murdered on a cruise ship. So I got a text message saying, "Hey, is Anna on a cruise? And you need to find out right away and call me." And I was like, "Do what?" So I called Anna's cell phone. She didn't answer. So then I got a hold of her on TikTok. Well, tried to get a hold of her on TikTok. She still didn't answer. So I started questioning, why is she asking me about that? So I got on my ex-husband's Facebook, where there was nothing on there. So I got on to Tabby, his second wife's Facebook, as the woman that raised my daughter. And there I seen a picture of her car with flowers on it. And Tabby saying they were going to leave it at the high school for a short time as a memorial for Anna. And so that's when I Googled 18-year-old dies on cruise ship is what I put in the search bar. And that's when my daughter's face popped up all over Google.
And I will say, admittedly, no matter who Heather was or is, no matter what her relationship with Anna was like, this would have been an extremely devastating way for her to find out that her child was dead. I do think that Christopher Kepner should have had the decency, a shred of decency, to call her and inform her. I mean, they must have had some love and respect for each other at one point in their lives. They did bring a daughter into this world together. He owed her at least that much. But according to Heather, her relationship with Christopher has been strained and distant and honestly just full of hatred for each other for some time. And she had no idea what was going on in Anna's life at all. Heather's sister Crystal told Nancy Grace that Christopher was the full custodial parent, but, quote, Chris doesn't tell Heather anything. Him and Heather do not get along. She's completely lost herself upon the divorce, finding out about the affair that he was having with the babysitter, and then divorce him, and then for that 15-year-old babysitter to then be the stepmom and get to be the one to raise Anna. I think it put Heather into she was not with it. Nobody will tell her anything because she's not the custodial parent, end quote. So now we have Crystal Wright, Heather's sister and Anna's biological aunt, coming out and saying, basically affirming the rumors about Tabitha being the 15-year-old babysitter when she and Christopher started some sort of relationship, even though I don't think that a 15-year-old girl can consent to a relationship with a grown-ass man. But they did eventually get married. But then Tabitha filed for divorce. And in the filing, Tabitha said that Christopher was abusive towards her and towards the children. So, I mean, I don't know. It's bad news. It's bad news all around. It doesn't look good for Christopher Kepner, to say the least. Now, Crystal also claims that Christopher Kepner messaged them on Thanksgiving, and they were threatened that if anyone spoke ill of him, he was going to file a lawsuit against them. So yeah, it's safe to say that the relationship, the dynamics between Heather Wright, her family, and Christopher Kepner and his family, not good. These people are not friends. They're not doing co-parenting very well. Now, Heather Wright has said that leaving Florida and moving to Oklahoma was the worst mistake she ever made, but she also claims that her ex-husband Christopher made it extremely difficult for her to keep in touch with Anna or be a part of Anna's life over the years. Heather stated, quote, "I loved my daughter. Let me get that straight right now. My children are my world, and even though I wasn't in her life, it doesn't mean I didn't think about her every day," end quote. Well, I don't think that Anna took comfort in the fact that you were thinking about her every day, but couldn't make the time to talk to her or help her out or go shopping for a prom dress with her, et cetera, et cetera. So you just weren't there. You weren't even in the state, right? You left the state. And I think that Anna probably would have been happier knowing that you were thinking about her every day while you were actively in her presence and able to see her and be a part of her life, not living in Oklahoma thinking about her every day, but whatever. So on November 20th, a celebration of life was held for Anna at the church she and her family attended, and Heather Wright claims that her ex-husband told her she was banned from attending, which is also what Martin Donahue said. Remember in his ex post, he said, we've been threatened that if we talk about anything before November 20th, we're going to be banned from the celebration of life. So we got two people saying this right now.
He told me that when I told him I was coming down there, he said that that he knew for a fact that Anna would not want me there. And I said, that's a lie. I was like, but whatever. And he goes, if you step foot in Florida, I will have you arrested immediately for back child support.
And so you went anyway, right?
Yeah.
In disguise?
Of course. Yeah. I wore a wig and I wore some really tall high heels, so that way, you know, if he was looking for somebody short, he wouldn't see me.
And were you able to attend the funeral? Did anyone see you or spot you? Like, tell me what happened next when you got there.
Nobody spotted me. I kind of stayed in the back, close to the door, so if I needed to make a quick getaway, I could. It was really nice. They had a lot of pictures of my daughter. I didn't see her dad, but then again, I wasn't trying to either. I stayed for a little bit, but I didn't stay for the whole thing. My anxiety got too high and I had to go.
On one hand, I completely understand Heather's perspective. Her daughter had just died. Any mother in that situation would want the chance to say goodbye, even if her relationship with her child was complicated or not perfect or strained, whatever. But at the same time, this whole situation feels like unnecessary drama to me, overshadowing who should actually matter here, which is Anna. Between the ongoing resentment between Heather and Christopher, the threats, the back and forth accusations, and then Heather publicly announcing on national media that she snuck in wearing a disguise, it shifts the spotlight away from Anna's life and the tragedy of her death and towards the dysfunction, once again, of the adults around her. Like, if all you cared about was being there and being able to mourn your daughter, why did you have to announce it on News Nation? It's almost like she's trying to rub it in Christopher's face. She's trying to show him how she got one up on him. She won this battle. Like, you told me I couldn't go? Well, screw you, because I put on a wig and some heels and nobody even saw me there. It feels less about Heather's relationship with Anna and more about her relationship with Christopher, her years-long rivalry with her arch nemesis / ex-husband. I find it very distasteful, very inconsiderate, very, not sensitive at all. And I think that's part of what makes this case so painful to look at. Again and again, we see the adults in Anna's orbit making choices that seem driven by ego, anger, resentment, selfishness, or the need to perform for the public, not by what would have been best for Anna, either in her life or after her death. If Heather truly went to the funeral simply to mourn her daughter, she should have kept that moment private. But instead, it became another headline, another soundbite, another piece of spectacle in a case already overflowing with it. And that pattern, The constant noise, the drama, the adults turning everything into a battle, making everything about them under the guise of this is what Anna would have wanted or not wanted. It's something we see all throughout Anna's story, all throughout her life. And the fact that these people couldn't come together, even when Anna was gone, and tried to work together and tried to, give Anna the best goodbye that they could. I don't understand people like this. I don't. So Anna's biological mother, Heather Wright, also highlights just how in the dark she was, to the point where she hadn't even known that Christopher Kepner had gotten divorced from Tabitha and remarried to someone else, Chantel.
Do you know anything about the stepbrother and the dynamic between Anna and him?
No, because I didn't even know that Tabitha and Christopher had gotten a divorce. I didn't even know he remarried. Like I said, Christopher and I do not talk whatsoever, and he made it extremely difficult for me to even have a relationship with my daughter. And the last time I seen my daughter, he again made me look like a piece of shit. So when I was getting on the airplane, I flicked him off and called him a few choice words I probably shouldn't have. And he told my daughter that I was telling her that. I was talking to her. So at that point, Anna kind of stopped talking to me. So,
I mean, is there a need to say more at this point? I think even that short clip speaks for itself. I feel like I will elaborate because my heart is just so broken for Anna, knowing the battleground she had to grow up navigating. In this clip, Heather frames the breakdown of her relationship with Anna as the result of a single moment where she flipped off her ex, and Christopher supposedly twisted that moment and used it to turn Anna against her, and then Anna didn't want to talk to her much after that. And maybe that's the story she tells herself. But when you look at Anna's own words, it becomes very hard to believe that this relationship collapsed because of one misunderstood middle finger, right? Anna wrote publicly about her mother's absence, about broken promises, about drugs, about feeling let down over and over again. Those posts don't sound like a teenager upset about a single moment. I think they make it clear that Anna had felt disappointed and abandoned for years, to the point where she had stopped expecting anything different. In some circles, when we're talking about attachment theory, they call it the burned out pursuer. A person who continues reaching out and trying to have a relationship and trying to get a connection and trying to express and receive love. And when they keep hitting a brick wall, eventually they just stop. They stop. They stop expecting that this person has the ability to give them what they need. And listening to both parents now, Christopher and Heather, it becomes painfully clear that neither of them could set aside their bitterness long enough to even pretend to be civil for the sake of their child. Two grown adults who were so wrapped up in their own resentment, their own egos, their own need to be right, that Anna ended up being collateral damage in a war she never asked to be a part of. They couldn't swallow their pride, not even for an afternoon, okay? Not even for an afternoon when Heather's visiting Anna and she's flying off on a plane, the daughter Anna's standing right there. They couldn't put on a show of basic respect or maturity, the bare minimum any child deserves, because getting the last word in or proving the other parent wrong was more important. And then for the celebration of life, they couldn't put it aside for one day to stand in solidarity, which, if you think about it, is probably what Anna actually would have wanted. And that's what really pisses me off, because Anna should never have had to navigate that level of emotional chaos. No child should. She should never have been placed in a position where she felt she had to choose sides or where she internalized their failures as her own. And even after her death, these two children masquerading as adults continue to take the attention off of Anna and her life and put it onto their petty bullshit. Whatever else happens in this case, whatever the investigation ultimately uncovers, one thing is clear. The adults in Anna's life, all of them at this point, had countless opportunities to rise above their personal drama, and they didn't. And whether they meant to or not, Anna paid the price for that long before she ever stepped foot on that cruise ship. I need to be very clear and concise when I say that she deserved better. Every child deserves better. Every child deserves to have at least one adult role model that teaches them how to communicate in a healthy manner, how to rise above the stupidity for the sake of something more important and bigger than themselves, how to sacrifice what they want for what someone else needs. And I think that even though she didn't have someone teaching her that, Anna became that person. She became the person who sent messages of love randomly to people throughout the day because she became the person that she always wanted to have. She wanted to have someone in her life who would send her random I love yous throughout the day, who would, sacrifice things for her, So in turn, she became that person that she always wished she'd had, that she'd always wished she'd been loved by. She became the person she wanted to be loved by. So many people do that, but it also turns you into kind of a people pleaser. And I think that Anna was a people pleaser for a lot of her life, but maybe as she grew older, she was sort of breaking out of that. She was speaking out. She was standing up for herself. She was getting stronger. Now, this is where we currently find ourselves with the Anna Kepner case. And of course, I expect much more to come out over the next days, weeks, and months. And I will make sure to keep you updated because I now feel personally responsible for ensuring Anna does not get lost in this mess. Now, as far as the 16-year-old stepbrother goes, Dan, if even a portion of the things being reported are true, such as him being the only one in the cabin with Anna at the time of her death, and the creepy way that he treated her and how he was kind of like infatuated with her, then I think it's pretty clear what happened here. I think there's only really one option of what happened here. Now, even though Anna was killed in international waters, the Carnival Horizon is a U.S.-based vessel that sails out of Miami, so both the victim and the suspect are U.S. citizens, and the ship returned to the U.S. where FBI agents boarded in Miami. So if I'm correct, I believe that if Dan is charged, he will be prosecuted in a United States federal court, not in a Florida state court. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody knows out there, but I think that's what will happen based on the fact that this was a cruise ship and they were in international waters at the time the crime was committed. I'm not sure. I think that's, from what I researched, I think that if he does go to court or if he does go to trial, it will be a federal trial, not a state court. And the federal government can try a 16-year-old as an adult for homicide. So can the state of Florida, actually. They do it. They have a pretty broad juvenile court system where, depending on the crime, they are more than willing in Florida to charge minors with adult crimes or as adults. So the federal government can definitely try a 16-year-old as an adult for homicide. Since this particular homicide involved asphyxiation, sustained force, like you had to hold that chokehold for several minutes, as well as concealment of the body, the likelihood of transfer to adult federal court is high, but who knows, man? Anything could happen right now. Anything could happen. They could try to make the case that Dan is not mentally well, which I think they might already be doing. He was psychologically examined. His mom is saying in court he's going to see a psychiatrist. They could say, hey, he wasn't able to understand the difference between right and wrong at the time of his crime. And I mean, it could be true. Could have a mental condition that makes it so that he was, I don't know, lost touch with reality. I don't know. We all know how these things work and the tactics that legal teams use, and I don't expect this to be resolved for quite some time. I guarantee you, because of the age of the potential offender, because of the circumstances, it's going to be a long road ahead of us, but I'm going to be there with Anna and for Anna, so I hope you guys are too. I will keep you updated. I'm going to check really quick before we sign off here to see if anything's been posted in the last 2 hours that I've been filming this. Actually, something was posted from Fox 35 Orlando 7 minutes ago. Good thing I checked. It says father of Anna Kepner will appear in court for child custody hearing. So this update is so new that it doesn't even look like there's an article yet. It's just a quick 7-minute video. And from what I gathered when I watched it just now, it's basically this: Christopher Kepner will show up in court tomorrow, December 5th, because I'm filming this on December 4th. So I'm going to get this over to my editor now so he can start, getting it ready. And then I will update you if we learn anything new during that court date. Christopher Kepner may plead the 5th and not say anything. And that's why he's going to show up in court, just to do that. Or he may answer some questions. Only time will tell. We will see. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section. I'm very much looking forward to having a conversation with you all. I know some of you, because there's always some of you who are going to be like, you're going too hard on the parents. You're going too hard on the parents. And it's like, maybe we all have our own biases. We all have our own things in our life that makes us a little bit more sensitive to things than certain things and other things. And yes, I'm sensitive about this. I see Anna and I see that she was trying to stay positive and she was trying to live a happy and good life and she was trying to pass lightness and goodness on to others. And I just don't feel that she was protected as well as she could have been. And I feel like her parents just continued making stupid mistakes and doing stupid things and bringing people into her life that, maybe weren't good for her and kind of forced her to live in a chaotic sort of environment all the time where she should have been on more solid and stable ground. And despite everything she went through, Anna was still a straight A student. She was still, cheerleading. She was still volunteering at her grandparents' senior home. She was still out there like having dreams and aspirations for herself. And I'm proud of her. I'm really, really, really sad that this happened. I don't know why, but this case has kind of gotten under my skin. So that's all I'll say about that. Feel free to flay me in the comments if you find it necessary, but I'm going to feel the way I feel regardless. There's something weird about how everybody in Anna's family is reacting in the wake of what happened to her. I feel like Christopher Kepner's family is just super nonchalant. Like, we're really going to miss her. She had a good 18 years. And Heather's family is just basically trying to make it look like Heather was innocent and, really wanted to be around for Anna, but just was incapable of doing so because of Christopher. And he's the problem. And he's over here like she's the problem. She can come to the celebration of life. Anna wouldn't have wanted that. Anna would not have wanted any of this from any of you. So I'm just disappointed. I'm disappointed in them. And I hope that they change their ways. Kind of like Anna said in that post, like when people continue betraying and manipulating and lying, like, all right, you've done it to me and I'll never forget it, but hopefully you learn from this and you don't go on to do it to other people because no one deserves that. No one deserves that. Anna didn't deserve it. Thank you guys so much for being here. Remember to like the video if you liked it, share it if you think it's worth sharing, subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time, stay kind, stay beautiful, and stay safe. I'll see you very soon. Love you so much.